Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, Republican Senator Mike Lee, from, I believe, the state of Utah, if I remember correctly. Let me make sure it's Utah so I don't disgrace the wrong state. Yes, it is Utah. I am not dishonoring the wrong state. I'm dishonoring the correct state. Anyway, after the assassination of Minnesotan Democrats, where a Minnesotan legislator was assassinated and their spouse was assassinated, and then another legislator was shot and almost killed along with their spouse in the sight of children. Their children. A parent died in front of their child, and the child watched it happen as this masked murderer who had a list of Democrats to kill, that somebody that, according to their neighbor, was extremely conservative, extremely right-wing, registered Republican, who hated abortion, that this person went out there, did this horrific act, and within 24 hours, Mike Lee was posting memes about it. And the post that he made about it was an image of the killer dressed in his gear, you know, with the mask and in the police uniform, ready to murder at the door of the people they murdered. He posted it and said, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." Now, the reason that he is writing it like this, and you might be confusing, right? Because on one hand, you could read this like, is he Marxist? When this is what happened, Marxists don't get their way. Like, is that a threat? Is like, this doesn't make any sense in relation to this guy. The reason he's saying this is that in the immediate aftermath of the assassination, there was a gigantic push online, whether it was a disinformation, misinformation. I probably suspect disinformation. There was a huge push to classify the assassin as some woke lefty Democrat. That this guy went out there and did these shootings because they wanted to fight against illegal immigration being stopped. And it's entirely dependent upon the fact that this guy, the murderer, was reappointed, not appointed. He was originally appointed by a previous governor back in 2016, but reconfirmed for a business advisory role that has no legislative impact and does the role of, I'm not kidding, hey, there's a sheet metal company coming into this town. We advise the government that you should train some locals in sheet metal manufacturing. Hey, there's a car manufacturing plant coming around. I think we should have some trade school teach about X, Y, and Z that could help, train somebody on a CNC machine or whatever would be useful in the production of automobiles. That was their role. They didn't legislate. They didn't have any financial power. Mike Waltz, the governor, that he references in multiple other posts. This is just one post, but he made multiple posts. This is just a post that he pinned on his social media because Mike Lee was so particularly proud of what he said here. He wanted to make sure that everybody saw it. But because this person, which Mike Waltz did not know, was reconfirmed once, not twice, but once by Waltz with no interview and no interaction for the hundreds and hundreds of local advisory board positions all across the country on a bipartisan board, a board that is meant to be bipartisan so it can serve the purpose of advising the government for the business interests, not the business interests, but the interests of making sure that people are trained for the businesses that are coming to the community. That's the role of this board. And that is what people ran with to say, well, Mike Waltz wouldn't appoint no Republican to a board. Yes, he would. He's done it many times. And again, he did not appoint him to the board. He simply reconfirmed him for the position he already had as he was appointed by the last governor. But this detail, despite the fact that the guy's neighbor described him as a devout Republican who would be angry that people are describing him as a Democrat, as somebody who wanted to go attack like abortion clinics, somebody who's like fervently against abortion, somebody who everybody that they targeted was a Democrat, everybody that they were going after, that they were tending to kill, were Democrats, were on what you would call the political left, being generous, of course, with that definition. To jump immediately on this while people are still bleeding out, the bodies are still warm, to jump out and spread this disinformation, it was unbelievably distasteful. And you want to know what? I didn't think that this would go anywhere. I mean, he still hasn't apologized yet, Mike Lee. And I think the odds of him apologizing as a supposed, man who holds up Christian values, I still find it to be quite low. But I think the reason why is there's been so much reward for this cynical use of corpses for partisan purposes. And just like there's no reward for telling the truth. There's no political reward for not lying on social media. And there is a political reward for being a cruel bastard. If you are a cruel bastard to your opponents, you get rewarded. You get rewarded with donations. You get rewarded with podcast appearances. The people that pay are the country, because this type of stuff stokes assassinations. This type of stuff stokes demonization of your political opponents. This is an assassination of Democrats that then Republicans will read this post thinking, oh, those Democrats, I can't believe they did this, further demonizing them and feeding into the very culture that is causing this political violence in the first place. The cruelty, the dismissiveness towards violence, the joking around violence. He made other jokes around it, around Tim Walz and the shooting, posting about it. And it feeds into this culture of cruelty in our politics. And Mike Lee was out there reaping the political benefits of the cruelty. But then the backlash, it came first in a small wave because there was actually quite a few people pushing this theory online, but most of them were no-name social media accounts, or like the usual disinformation suspects, right? The usual liars. This guy is a sitting senator from the state of Utah, one of two senators from the state, one of 100-person body, one of the strongest and most powerful bodies on the planet. When the president, when they don't, when they actually might, limit the president's power in any moment or two. Either way, this is a moment where we should be trying to maybe reach across, I hate to say it this way, but reach across the aisle to say the basic sentence of, let's not shoot each other. And he chose to drag those corpses that had just been shot in front of their kids and do it from completely partisan purposes. And he's getting dragged. Some of it is, the usual outlets that are going to go after politicians for these types of mess ups. For example, here's The Onion saying, Mike Lee stresses he would have posted same thing if own family was savagely murdered. But also, there was quite a few responses, not only in social media, not only did the news media cover it, but also there was responses from people on Capitol Hill. Apparently, Senator Tina Smith confronted Mike Lee in person over these posts. And according to her, he was surprised that anyone confronted him. And since then, I've noticed, if you check his social media, why he hasn't deleted the post, he has removed it from his pinned comment, but he still has yet to apologize. We'll let her tell her how that conversation went.
Two things. One, he said, quote, this is what happens when...
Mind you, every politician here has a motivation to discourage this type of behavior because, hey, what happens if, because I got to ask this question. If a Democrat was shot next to Mike Lee, would he take a picture of it and post it online and say, this is what Biden did? Is this to the level of where our congressional bodies are at?
Two things. One, he said, quote, this is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. And then in an apparent reference to the governor, Tim Walz, he wrote, nightmare on Walt Street. You were seeing
Nightmare on Wall Street. He's joking about it. It's a joke to him, man. These dead people are a joke to him. A kid watched their parents die right in front of him, and the Christian thing for him to do is go, ha ha. That's his position. Now he seems to be getting a little bit of blowback, and he seems to be maybe quieting down about it. We're going to show you a clip later of him kind of like scuttling away from the press as they burn him over it. But this is awful. And the thing is, not only he's laughing at it, but he's laughing at it based off of a lie.
talking to Senator Lee on Capitol Hill earlier.
Well, is it that hard to wait for the bodies to get cold and the facts to be clear before you run your mouth off? It's not like his time in the Senate was determinant upon whether or not he dragged these corpses out to poke it with a stick.
What did you say to him?
Well, I wanted Senator Lee, who, I mean, honestly, I don't have much. I don't know him well. We have not dealt with each other that much. I wanted him to know about the consequence of his words, and I went to him and I said, you're.
To be clear, she is a senator from Minnesota, so this is her state where these assassinations are taking place. And she was the right person to confront him if anyone was going to confront him. Look at that picture, by the way. Hands in the pockets.
Your message on social media showed the image of the man who killed my friend, potentially minutes before that happened. And your message was, this is what happens. You need to take responsibility and accountability for what you were saying and doing out there in the social media world. And I wanted him to hear that from me directly and not to for me to tweet out at him. I think that is important, that he understands, again, the consequence of what the impact that his words have on people who are going through so much pain and trauma. This is not a joke. And he needs to understand over 7 million people dialed into his message on social media. He has a powerful platform. He should not be using it to spread misinformation and to basically make a joke of the murder of people, of public servants.
What did he have to say when you confronted him with that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think this is a person who's used to being confronted. I don't think he's somebody who's used to being challenged, and I think he didn't quite know what to do. I approached him from a position of respect and wanting him to understand what I thought. And he didn't have that much to say. What he needs to do is he needs to apologize. I really think that he should take that post down. To indicate that somehow this was some sort of a Marxist leftist attack that causes violence is completely false. He's spreading that misinformation, and he should correct that. I didn't get any of that from him earlier this evening, but I hope that what I said sunk in, and that he, as my mother used to say, words have consequences, and his words have a ton of consequence, and he should own that.
It's pretty striking to hear that you went up and you said, I know these people, your community has been so affected by this, and he didn't even apologize to you in that interaction?
I mean, he said, how many times have we heard the words that go something like, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, or I'm sorry if you didn't understand what that's not, in my mind, taking accountability or responsibility for your actions. And so I can't paraphrase exactly what he said, but that was the gist of it.
I'm sorry if this hurt your feelings. That is the most non-apology apology somebody can cook up. It's the type of thing where somebody's talking to you and you can tell they're genuinely offended, and you can't really, either because you're in the wrong, or you just don't want to bother, or you don't want to make the situation worse, and so you just say, I'm sorry if that's how you feel. But it can only be read as a non-apology apology. Mind you, he has not only just himself getting confronted on this, but apparently his top staffers were also getting confronted by Senator Tina Smith's staffers in an email. So it wasn't just Mike Lee that was getting responded to. It was also his staff. Listen to this. This is from one of Senator Smith's staffers, heard Deputy Chief of Staff. I knew Melissa Hortman. Many people in this office did. She was a longtime friend of Senator Smith's who had seen her hours before she was murdered. So you'll forgive my candor as I speak through enormous grief. It is important for your office to know how much additional pain you've caused on an unspeakably horrific weekend. I am not sure what compelled you or your boss to say all of those things, which in addition to being unconscionable, also may very well be untrue. But that is not the point. Why would you use the awesome power of the United States Senate office to compound people's grief? Is this how your team measures success? Using the office of U.S. senators to post not just one, but a series of jokes about an assassination? Is that a successful day of work on Team Lee? Did you come into your office Monday and feel proud of the work you did over the weekend? Let's recap Saturday so you fully understand what Minnesota was going through. Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered. Senator Hoffman and his wife were shot numerous times and remain hospitalized. By the grace of God, it appears they will survive. Senators are discovered to be on a hit list of armed men on the run. Senator Lee's colleagues. And the decision of the office of the Senator Mike Lee was not to publicly condemn the violence or to express condolences to her shattered children. It was to suggest that Melissa and Mark somehow deserve this. By making jokes, did you have any consideration for the survivors and her family, for the Hoffmans in the hospital, for their families? You exploited the murder of a lifetime public servant and her husband to post some sick burns about Democrats. Did you see this as an excellent opportunity to get likes and retweets? Have you absolutely no conscience, no decency? I pray to God that none of you ever go through anything like this. I pray that Senator Lee in your office to begin to see the people you work with in this building as colleagues and human beings. And I pray that if, God forbid, you ever find yourself having to deal with anything similar, you find yourselves on the receiving end of the kind of grace and compassion that Senator Mike Lee could not muster. Lastly, I suggest you take a few minutes to read about Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark. They were remarkable people. Here's a story in the St. Paul Pioneer Press called Melissa Hortman. Once a teenager with a job making burritos, she became a powerful Minnesota lawmaker who trained service dogs. She was a force and a human being, and I beg of you to exercise some restraint on social media as we continue to grieve. Now, Mike Lee was not just confronted by the senator from Minnesota. He was also confronted by the press and completely refused to answer any questions about what happened.
Could you tell us about your conversation with Senator Smith? Do you regret your tweet? Do you stand by the post that you made on X?
Have you had a productive conversation about that post? Was that what the senator wanted to speak to you about?
What did you think of the meeting you just came from?
Just dead silence. Dead silence. Somebody in chat just said his career's over. Nope. Sorry to say this, but I don't think that's the case. He might never be respected by his colleagues again. He might be seen as somebody who's dangerous, who would dance over their graves if given the opportunity. But I don't think it'll cost him his job. Unless he loses in a Republican primary, no Democrat is winning in Utah in the near future. That's something that would take a lot of effort to build up, and good luck with that. It just doesn't seem like it's in the cards right now. So unless Senator Mike Lee gets primaried from within his own party, he's peachy keen safe. Now, that was the first front that Mike Lee had to deal with. I do want to give a second shout out just to the fact that he's also in some deep water because he wants to sell millions of acres of public land for development. Land like this that was being shouted out by people who are of a more, how you could say, classical liberal kind of like Roosevelt style, Teddy Roosevelt style, like, hey, we are in favor of conservation Republicans. And they see that he wants to sell off all these beautiful acres of land, and they're quite upset, saying, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to sell off so much of America's public land? Now, he responds to this by saying, none of the places depicted would be eligible for sale under our bill. The legislation specifically exempts national parks, national monuments, wilderness areas, national recreation areas, and 11 other categories of federally protected land from sales to build much-needed housing for American families. Now, to be clear, this is not true. Not only is there, the Twitter added context feature, but the pictures, that land, that is for sale. This land is for sale. This land is for sale. This land is for sale. He's just saying that there's some land that won't be, not the land that's pictured, but some land that meets the standard of national parks, which is certainly not the majority of the land and is quite a small, stringent standard, that specifically won't be up for sale. But this land right here where people go to, camp out in the forest and spend time with their families, enjoy the great outdoors, the natural wonders of the United States, something that once you get rid of, you might never get back, something we can completely squander for our future generations, that is still up for sale. And he's gotten confronted over it. But, I mean, you can just see it right here. It is up for sale. He's just lying about it. So, Mike Lee really not having a great batting average this week. By the way, I do want to throw out there that this culture of cruelty didn't come out of nowhere. And when Trump was asked if he had a plan to call Tim Walz about the shooting, his response to it was, I think the governor of Minnesota is whacked out. I'm not calling. Why would I call him? The guy doesn't have a clue. He's a mess. So I could be nice and call him, but why waste time? Because you don't want more politicians being shot and us approaching caning of Charles Sumter style territory. That's why. For the health of the nation, not because you like or dislike Tim Walz. Who, what? He called you weird and you haven't gotten over it? Lastly, I wanted to show this clip of Representative Randy Fine being asked about political demonization and what that's calling. This is a legislative from Florida's 6th congressional district, and he's being asked of whether or not, the type of rhetoric that he engages in is at all contributing to this extremely, toxic political environment.
Because there's a lot of I do want to talk to you about some of the rhetoric, because there's a lot of talk about rhetoric and how this gins people up. A few years ago, you were called out for calling a school board member a whore in a text. You've called one of your congressional colleagues a terrorist. Are you part of the problem here?
Well, look, I think what people write in private text messages to each other is one thing. If I had said that in a public message, I'd understand. But I do think there are issues. Look, when we have protests on Saturday calling something no kings, when Donald Trump isn't a king, he's been elected overwhelmingly by the American people, and it's compared to the revolution, I mean, that is a call for violence.
Come on. What? You saying the president's acting like a king? Don't you realize that's tantamount to Al-Qaeda style threats? No, it's not tantamount to an Al-Qaeda style threat. It's not tantamount to any style threat. If somebody says, even if somebody calls for revolution, right? Okay, you can ask, what do you mean by that? Are you talking Bernie Sanders style political revolution? Are you calling for something violent? That's a fair enough follow-up question. But the vast majority of people going out to protest were protesting because President Donald Trump believes that he can behave like a king, that he can take American citizens and deport them to foreign countries. He said he wanted to deport the homegrowns. He wanted to deport them. He takes women and send them to a men's prison in El Salvador, regardless of even if they have a criminal record. And how do you think those women would do in a men's prison with a lot of MS-13 and other, let's just say, quite vicious gang members? Like, what about Donald Trump calling for banning of certain First Amendment rights? not only like his longstanding position of prison time for burning flags, but also him targeting the broadcasting rights of news organizations that don't cover him flatteringly, like a flattering image, or the fact that he is turning the White House press pool into basically like a group jerkmate session of just people asking him, President Trump, why are you so handsome? President Trump, why is your tie so nice? President Trump, why are you so good on immigration? So, people saying, look, the president has an authoritarian tendency. He tends to think that executive orders are the end all be all, that he doesn't have to have any congressional oversight, and that he can take the richest man in the world, throw him into congressionally created institutions, have him gut him, and then walk away as if nothing happened. So, yeah, I mean, he's acting in a way that is unconstitutional and is authoritarian in a manner that makes him think that I have power, therefore I have the right to do it. And which is the type of stuff kings think. And you want to know what? It's not just something he says. It's something J.D. Vance says. It's something that all the people around him say, that, hey, he won the election. He has a mandate. He can do this. That's not how the system works. It's not, we have power so we can do what we want. We have a system of checks and balances that he continues to disregard. I mean, like 40% of the Trump administration's rhetoric has just been going after the fact that courts have stopped him from doing unconstitutional actions.
A curd is a curd.
Patch has got a Tier 4 subscription. Eventually, you'll be playing classic North Korean children's pastime, informing on your neighbors.
But to be clear, like when I watch those like Donald Trump press conferences, it feels like a North Korean press conference. It feels like the type of stuff you would put on DPRK TV in order to create the appearance of an independent like press corps that might actually ask an important question or two, and they're just all like, what exactly size horn do the South Koreans have on their head? How big are the devil horns on the head of American soldiers? What type of children do they eat? Mexican, Chinese, Korean? Like this is, I'm sorry, Donald Trump acts like a king. People call him a king. And if you, as, an American, are so put off by a no kings protest, I mean, that's more question about you than it is a statement about anybody else.
And people are waving signs that say 86-47. I think we've heard this discussion about taking down the temperature after President Trump was assassinated twice, and I don't think people are getting the message. So this is...
He was assassinated twice. I had no clue. I thought he missed. I guess you know what? From right here, God, man, I wish I could pull some QAnon stuff. I wish I could do it. If I was a QAnoner, right? This is the type of stuff I would clip and repost and say, Trump is a body double. This is fake Trump. That's Joe Biden in a Trump skin suit. The deep state continues to reign. But God, man, that's a moneymaker if I ever heard one. I have the long-standing position. I was convinced of this by a buddy of mine, Lebanese-Ukrainian friend of mine, that Donald Trump needs to go out and say that this is not the real Putin. That it's a fake Putin. That this is definitely not the real one. That the real one would have come to a deal, and that this is a fake body double. And while I doubt that'll bring the war any closer to a close, it'll force Vladimir Putin to go out in public more as a 70-something-year-old man and start, stressing himself. And the more, mileage you get on the car, the sooner it is to break down, as they say. I said as they say, but I don't think that's a thing people say. I just said that.
Are you not getting the message too? To be fair, is it fair to say that the way that you speak to your colleagues, what you say about them, and the fiery rhetoric that you also use is also an issue that you're thinking about maybe changing?
It's a fair point, but I think fiery rhetoric is different than a call for violence. Calling evil for what it is, calling danger for what it is acceptable. It's when you cross that line and you say, and that person should be killed. That's never a line that I've crossed, nor do I think it should be done. But we saw that kind of rhetoric just on Saturday at these protests, and I think that is a problem. We've seen it repeatedly with President Trump for years, and I do think it's a problem. And the problem is these people are crazy. This guy in Minnesota, he's going to turn out to be crazy. And when crazy people hear these things, these problems do well up.
It really was gross, and I do feel like we should at least give it a little bit of a mention